Hey friend, welcome to Calligraphy Biz Corner, where we spill the ink on our real life experiences as creative biz owners.
We're your hosts, Elaine and Xiao Chen, full-time wedding calligraphers and business educators with over a decade of experience working with wedding, luxury, and corporate clients, and we've mentored hundreds of calligraphers just like you.
And we're in your corner. Let's uncover the business that supports the life that you want and leave the overwhelm and imposter syndrome behind. Grab your coffee and notebook and let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Calligraphy Biz Corner. Before we jump into today's episode, we have a very exciting milestone that we want to share with you. We just passed the 2-month mark, and we just want to send a heartfelt thank you to everybody who's listening and following the show. This is our 7th episode, and that's also a huge milestone for us because as we were kind of starting this podcast journey, we were digging a lot into like statistics, and we did see a stat somewhere. We can't remember where we saw it, so please don't fact check us, but it said that 90% of podcasters don't get past the 3rd episode. So we're super proud of ourselves, honestly, like pat ourselves on the back here for getting to episode 7.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But we are very passionate about this project, and we just wanted to share some ways that you can support the show if you have been liking our episodes and you want to help us keep bringing you this calligraphy biz content. So the most important thing that you can do for us is to follow the show. So whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just click that follow button and then tell your friends about it. So if you're listening to an episode and you're like, I think that she would love to hear this, then please send it to her, whoever her is. You can also leave us a rating, which just takes 1 second of your time. So when you're listening, just tap the number of stars that you want to give us. And then if you have more than 1 second and you want to write us a review, we would love your feedback in a review form. Again, you can do that on Apple and on Spotify. I guess you could also leave a comment on YouTube if you're listening on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we would love to hear from you. So if you have any feedback or if you have topic ideas, things that you want to hear in the coming months, please send us a DM on Instagram at Calligraphy Biz Corner, and we will chat with you there.
Yes, thank you guys so much for listening and supporting the show. It means so much to us. With that, we're going to dive into today's topic. We're going to be talking about imposter syndrome and some ways that we can overcome it. So let's start by defining imposter syndrome. I feel like it's a complex feeling and it's hard to put into words. So I actually looked up the definition on the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and they define it as a psychological condition that's characterized by persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud despite evidence of one's ongoing success. I feel like that sums it up really well, actually.
Exposed as a fraud is like, oh my God.
Exactly. That's the crux of it. I thought we could talk a little bit just to kind of make it feel more real, like talk about how it shows up for each one of us. So, Elaine, how does imposter syndrome show up for you?
Yeah. So for me, imposter syndrome is that feeling of just not being good enough, not being worthy enough, and fearing judgment of others. So I find that when I am feeling imposter syndrome, it tends to hold me back from sharing things, posting, on social media, pursuing new ideas because I don't think that I'm good enough or worthy enough or know enough about it. So yeah, it's just really that feeling of doubt, and I guess in a way too of being exposed as a fraud, like, oh, maybe somebody's gonna figure out that like I don't know everything and I don't have all the answers and I'm not fit to be speaking on this topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it shows up for me. How about you?
For me, I tend to like overconsume content. And a lot of times, my admiration borders on something that's unhealthy. So I will kind of like fixate on someone that I am inspired by. But rather than letting it motivate me to action, I will just be kind of like consumed in not a healthy way, maybe have feelings of jealousy. And then like feeling like I'm never going to be where they are. So, and those kinds of emotions just kind of snowball for me sometimes. And then I go down rabbit holes of like comparing myself, and it completely sucks up my productivity. So imposter syndrome is pretty detrimental to me, but imposter syndrome affects everybody, no matter where you are in your journey, no matter how much experience you've had. And chances are that you've also felt it, even if it shows up differently for you than it does for us. So, what we hope to do with this episode is to arm you with some strategies to combat it when those feelings arise. And we're going to start with two tactical approaches that you can put into action. And then we'll end with two mindset strategies. So, let's dive in. Elaine, what is the first suggestion you have for overcoming imposter syndrome?
So, the first thing that I like to do when I start to feel imposter syndrome creep in is to look at the evidence. Imposter syndrome is 100% feeling based. Like, even in the definition that you read before, it said that it's a psychological condition. So, in order to combat it, I think that it's helpful to look at and focus on the actual facts that are surrounding me rather than whatever it is that I'm feeling inside. I try to collect all of the evidence that I am good enough, that I am worthy, that there is room for me at the table. So for me, this looks like referring to past reviews from clients. I've mentioned this in previous episodes before, but I keep a Google Doc that has all of my favorite client reviews in it. Whenever imposter syndrome does start to show its ugly head, I revisit these testimonials because they serve as tangible proof that I am good at what I do, that my clients value my work, and that my services are both needed and appreciated. The next thing that I like to do is remind myself of where I started and where I am now. Being able to reflect on my journey helps highlight the growth that I've achieved and just reinforces my belief and my trust in my own capabilities. I've been tapping into this one a lot lately as I start to dive deeper into the business mentorship side of my business. I've had to confront a fear of failure, feelings of inadequacy, worrying that like I might not be able to get this new idea off the ground, but reminding myself that I've already built a business once really helps empower me to be able to navigate these challenges with confidence because I know that I'm already building upon a solid foundation of past experience. So I think it can be really helpful just to look at where you were, whether it's 6 months ago, a year ago, or 5, 10 years ago, and where you are now, and just look at how far you've come.
Yeah, similarly, I like to also remind myself of what I've been capable of in the past, not just in building this business, but also in past jobs or past experiences that I've had in school or whatever that may be. Because all of the skills that you've collected throughout your life, throughout your various careers, all of that is going to translate and be part of who you are today. So I look back on those wins and successes too. And I think this is especially helpful if the business part of it is new to you. So when I just started, I remember I would build up my confidence by thinking to myself, like, I used to be a business consultant and I advised Fortune 500 companies. I was a director at the number one CRM company in the world and I managed a team and created new functions. Like, I really thought about the things that really, really pushed me and challenged me and that I overcame. Because ultimately, I think remembering how you have overcome challenges in the past is what helps you build the confidence to do that again in a different capacity. And so all of those accomplishments and the skills I learned, they don't go away because I'm starting something brand new and that I don't have any idea what I'm doing yet. So many of the things that I learned are still translatable to what I'm doing now. And that really helps to channel my confidence towards something new.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder that just because maybe you aren't starting from like your own business, you have past experience just from living life and working and having another job or another career. And all of those have skills that can be applied to your business. The next thing that I like to do when it comes to looking at facts versus feelings is this one's super tactical. So if you pull out a journal or a notepad, I like to make a list of the opportunities that I could miss out on if I don't do something because of imposter syndrome. So I'll write down, like, on the left side of the page what my fear is around whatever it is that I'm thinking about doing, and then what the opportunity is that I could miss out on if I listen to that fear. So, for example, it could be like, I'm scared to share about my business because I'm scared that people will judge me. And then on the right side, my missed opportunities could be I miss out on potential jobs, or I miss out on a really cool opportunity, or I miss out on the chance of like just getting to do something that I love for a living because I'm not talking about it. Another example is I'm scared to increase my pricing because I'm scared that people won't pay, or I don't feel like I'm worth that or worthy of making that much money, whatever the case may be. And on the right side, my missed opportunities would be, I risk staying in my current financial situation, or I risk working 24/7 because I'm not charging enough and I'm just always working in my business.
I love that that is so evidence-based, like you said. You start to think about, like, the consequences of whether you choose to do this or not choose to do it. It's like you just described an imposter syndrome worksheet right there, so I love that.
Yeah, and it really is. It's like thinking of the consequences if you're not gonna do something, and for me, that's usually enough to just, like, get my butt in gear and be like, "Okay, shut this down."
Mhm.
I'm not listening to the fear and the doubt and the judgment anymore because the things that I will miss out on are far too important than, what other people may think of me or what I'm thinking of myself right now or whatever the case may be. Our second tactical strategy for overcoming imposter syndrome is to create more than you consume. So I really love this one. I forget where I had originally kind of stumbled upon this idea, but as soon as I heard it, it like totally changed my world. Social media is both a blessing and a curse. I think that we can probably all agree on that. And I definitely, just like you, I find myself getting hit with imposter syndrome when I'm just mindlessly scrolling and just like being, inundated with what everybody else is doing and how great their lives look and all of that. So, my number one tip is to just stop doing that. Just stop the mindless scroll. Some of the ways that I actually like put this into action on a daily basis include setting boundaries around social media and my phone. So, I try really hard to not pick up my phone or look at social media before 9 a.m. and after 10 p.m. I actually just put my phone on do not disturb. So, like, as soon as 10 p.m. hits, it goes into like sleep, do not disturb. And then that stays on until 9 a.m. So, I'm not getting text messages from anybody. I'm not getting hit with any other sort of notifications. And I really try my very best to not open any of, the social media apps during those hours as well. Instead, I try to focus on something for myself, whether it be taking a walk, reading a book, answering emails first thing, like whatever the case may be. I just try to do whatever needs to be a priority for me during that time rather than letting other people like kind of dictate and get into my mental space. Whenever I do open Instagram, I try to open it with intentions. That means like it can either be I'm going to be posting something, or I'm opening it to engage with other accounts, or I'm opening it to check my DMs and get back to somebody. The second I catch myself just mindlessly scrolling, I close the app immediately and put the phone down. So the main idea here with this like create more than you consume is to just do something for you or to get the work that you need to get done before you allow all of those external distractions to influence your mindset.
Yeah, and I do find that social media can really just suck you in. Sometimes even if I am going in with a specific thought in mind, like I'll go check my Facebook group for my course, and then I'll open Facebook and all of a sudden I'm bombarded with all these like updates from people that I haven't talked to in forever and like a message from Marketplace or whatever it is. And all of a sudden I have completely forgotten what I went to do. And that's kind of just like how social media behaves in general. It's like a bit chaotic. So I totally agree with just like putting blinders on, getting the stuff you need to get done first, and maybe like designating the time for scrolling, rather than letting it take over. Along those lines, I talked a little bit about how social media can make me overconsume, make me go down these rabbit holes. I finally solved it by just muting certain accounts if I found that I was becoming too attached to what somebody else was doing. And it's like not a knock on them. These are still people that I admire, their work and everything. I just find that it's a little bit better for my mental health if I choose when I go and take a look at what they're up to rather than just, being bombarded with content at any moment because I can't control what Instagram decides to show me. So I rather kind of choose when I go down the rabbit holes, if that makes sense. That really helps me to stay in my lane, like I was saying, and just focus on my own ideas and focus on executing those.
Yeah, that's a really great tip to like mute accounts if they aren't serving you. I mean, I've even unfollowed accounts before if they aren't serving me, or I notice myself like spiraling into negative thoughts whenever they come up. And it's really not, like you said, it's not a knock on them. It's not an insult. Like you have to do what's best for you and put those boundaries in place, whatever that ends up looking like. And nobody's going to take offense if you're putting your mental health first.
Yeah. And then another reminder is like we follow way more calligrapher accounts, art accounts, like stationer accounts than the average person does. And we're constantly bombarded by all these things that other people aren't seeing. And that does make it a little bit hard for us to come up with our own ideas.
Yeah, actually, that reminded me of something else. It's like diversifying your feed helps too, right? Like, so don't just follow calligraphers, follow other people that inspire you because that can also just help you see like what else is possible or what kind of content are they sharing and like serve as inspiration for your own business without feeling like it's a direct, I don't know if the direct copy is the right word, but it's just helpful to see what other people are doing, like in other industries rather than just your own.
Yeah, that's a great point. Our third strategy is more mindset focus, and I call this one lean into the discomfort. I love this saying, and it reminds me that when things get tough, I've learned that those most uncomfortable moments are actually when I'm on the brink of something really big. So I try to remind myself that when I'm feeling that discomfort and the challenge, that it's because I'm growing and I'm stretching. And it's probably something that's going to like shift my identity. And that's why it feels so uncomfortable and new. So I'm going to give a couple examples of when I've felt this throughout my career or throughout my business journey. One of them was when I became a people manager at a past job. It was like a huge learning curve. I had just only ever focused on making sure my own work was done well as an individual contributor. And it was really uncomfortable because now I not only was in charge of making sure that my work was done well, but also motivating other people to do their work well. And so much more of a soft skills thing than kind of a follow these steps and you'll be successful thing. Like you really have to find your own style as a manager. And that was hugely uncomfortable for me in this business. I would say the biggest leap that I took and when I felt the most uncomfortable was when I decided to launch my course, my first course, Pro Wedding Calligrapher. Even though I had already mentored 30 calligraphers one on one at that point, I still felt that like the dictionary definition of like worried about being exposed as a fraud. I had never created a course before, right? But I did know like what were the themes that people wanted to learn and what they struggled with. And even all of that evidence that I had and that I knew, I still felt really nervous. And there was so much that I hadn't done before with creating a course, like how to be an effective educator, how to outline and structure the lessons, how to record myself, what kind of tech to use, like how to price the course. I mean, like so many things that I had to learn. And it was really, really growing and stretching me. And it was literally the first thing that I would think about when I woke up and the last thing that I thought about when I went to bed. But that obsession kind of became a motivator for me to take action. Like the only way I realized I could resolve my discomfort was if I did something about it. And that's kind of why I love the saying of lean into the discomfort. Really let that be something that motivates you to move forward, to take action. So that's exactly what I did. I started doing a lot of research with my audience. I figured out the outline. I launched a pre-sale and then 45 people signed up for it during that pre-sale. That was far more than I expected. I didn't know what to expect, but I was thinking maybe like 10, right? But I think because I like put in that legwork and I really let that discomfort drive me to action that it led to a really great outcome because I cared about it so much. Talk about a really big moment for pushing through imposter syndrome. It really built my confidence to see that many people believe in me and trust me to help build their businesses. I just like lit the fire to create something that was really great for them because at the time of the pre-sale, I hadn't actually created the course yet. People literally bought just by seeing the outline I put out there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to make this the best course I can possibly create for them. And now there's 170 students in the course. I think the course is coming up on 3 years old. I still regularly get messages from people saying that they love it. And I gave them the roadmap to get their business off the ground. I just feel like I let the imposter syndrome really drive me to do what I wanted to do. It like helped me to make that big leap. So anyway, just reminder to kind of like use that energy towards where you want to go. And also, if you want to learn more about the Pro Wedding Calligrapher course, I will drop a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I love that story. And listening to you talk about it also just made me think of this podcast. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know what the hell we're doing,
Yes.
but we wanted to start this podcast and like we kept talking about it and we did all the, the research and the work of figuring out the tech and how to edit videos and how to record and how to even just get it onto the streaming platforms. Like even that we had a curveball thrown at us. Remember, we were like, oh my God, it's going to take 2 weeks to go onto Spotify. Like we didn't know that.
That's a story that our listeners don't know. We were worried we wouldn't be able to launch on our launch date because we discovered that it apparently took up to 2 weeks to get published as a brand new podcast.
Exactly. I definitely had that imposter syndrome of like, who are we to be launching a podcast? There's so many podcasts out there already. Is there room for us? Does anybody even care? Do they want to hear what we have to say? Like all of those things were going on in our minds. But I think that we both kind of have that like in touch with our intuition of like the discomfort is actually a good thing because we've experienced it enough and we've learned how to lean into it that we're like, no, we're just going to keep going and we're going to figure it out. And like, thank God we did. Cause honestly, same thing with like your signups for your course. Like we thought that 2 people were going to listen to this podcast.
Right. Yeah, we really had no expectations.
How many downloads our first day? We were like, holy crap, there's more than 10. And it's more
I
than just like
know.
my boyfriend, your husband, It's just, I feel like it's all a good reminder that you're always going to start from a place of not knowing, but also going back to like looking at the evidence when you do feel that discomfort and you are trying to lean into it to remember that like you're starting with something. You're starting with some sort of skill or knowledge or something that you can take into this next phase. And that will hopefully help you lean into that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
I also remind myself that like our brains are so smart. They're actually wired to keep us safe, which makes sense, right? Like throughout history and evolution, like we probably wouldn't have made it this far as a species if our brains didn't sense fear and discomfort or danger and say run in the opposite direction. So like
Yeah.
that's what they're designed to do. But I think that as just individuals as well as business owners, we need to learn how to differentiate between like real danger and fear and what I kind of refer to as like good fear, which is fear that's actually pushing you towards something greater. It's actually funny. I had a DM from a calligrapher today on Instagram saying that she had just upped her hourly rate. And when she sent like that rate to the client the night before, like she had the knot in her stomach and that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. And what if they say no and all of that stuff? And she was like, but they said yes. And like, that's the highest that I've ever booked. And it's like, yes, exactly. That means that you're supposed to grow. You're supposed to push yourself. Like you're helping yourself get to that next level by taking those scary things. And like, it's good that your stomach is like in knots while you're sending that. I've had that so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I just believe that feeling is kind of the sign that we're not supposed to stay stagnant with where we are. Just like you went through this with your course, like I've personally grappled with this lately with launching my one-on-one mentorship program. There's been a ton of fear and uncertainty coming up during this time in a multitude of ways, but I'm just trusting that the persistent dream that's been in me has helped me embark on this journey. And it's kind of starting with this podcast and then expanding into the mentorship program.
I'm glad we're sharing this and being like honest and transparent about the fear that we felt because I think from the outside, you don't necessarily see that. You don't see someone else's imposter syndrome usually, right? Unless they're
Right.
specifically talking about it. So from the outside, it'd be like, of course, Elena is qualified to launch this mentorship. She's done so many weddings, worked with high end clients. It's a no brainer. And it's like so funny when somebody else tells you that and gives you that external validation, even though that is absolutely not how you feel at all inside.
Yep, exactly. Well, and this actually kind of brings us to one of our last points, which is it's kind of a two-parter. We wanted to talk about affirmations, but we also wanted to talk about writing your own narrative, and I think that that ties in really well because it's kind of along the lines of fake it till you make it, but I do believe in showing up as the person that you actually want to become and understanding that you have the power to be able to write and to tell your own story, and that your self-belief actually shapes the way other people perceive you. Like, of course, you are in a position where you can educate others on how to build a wedding calligraphy business. Even though you are feeling all of that imposter syndrome sometimes inside with certain things, it's like there is also a reason why you're not letting it all out into the world, right? Because you're not going to constantly show up telling people like I don't feel confident in myself or
Mhm.
I'm struggling with this. Like there's also a balance of being real and authentic, but also having the confidence that you need and like outwardly presenting that confidence, right? Like think about it with proposals. Like if I sent somebody a proposal and I was like, well, the price is $3,000 and I don't really know if I'm actually worth that much
Right.
or if I can actually charge that much, but I'm hoping that you say
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. It's like, well, I've never done this part before, but I'm hoping that you trust I can figure it out. Like that does go through my mind, but I usually don't tell the client.
Exactly. But if you are like, you know what, I can do this and this is my pricing and this is why I charge what I charge and this is what you're going to get from working with me and this is the value, these are the services I'm going to be providing. X, Y, and Z, even though in the back of your mind, you might be like, this is the highest package that I've ever sent out. And I don't know if I'm actually worthy of this. Like, you presenting it with all of that confidence to the client is going to make them go, oh, yeah, she knows what she's talking about. I
Mhm.
trust her. This totally seems worth it. That's a no brainer. I'm going to sign and book with her.
Yeah.
Getting back to this, like creating your own narrative, quote unquote fake it till you make it, which I feel like can be, I don't know, I feel like people have different thoughts on that. But for me, it's really just showing up as the person that I want to become rather than letting myself be stuck in this story of like, no, that isn't meant for me, or I'm not worthy of that, or I'm not good enough for that, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And maybe we don't like the word like fake it. The thought for me is kind of like have enough confidence in yourself that you can figure it out. Like maybe that's
Mhm.
another way you can think about it is that yes, maybe I don't have this exact capability at this moment, but I know that I have all these skills that kind of surround that thing that I need to do that I'm confident that I can execute on something new. And I think we all need that because if we didn't have that, we would never do anything new.
Exactly.
So along the lines of kind of being able to think like a future shaping your own narrative, I also listened to a podcast that gave the advice of making decisions as though you're already where you want to be. And I found this to be so powerful. It's what you're saying, but in a it's like a very specific capacity is like make decisions the way that future you would make them. So, like, when I have a fully booked wedding business, for example, is this something that I would be concerned about? Is this where I would be spending my time or my money? And just thinking like the future successful you that you envision yourself to be. And that really helps me to begin feeling like the business owner that I want to become.
Yeah, I love that tip so much. And I do that myself as well, like in my own business. Like I try to think about where is it that I want to be and how would Elaine act? Like, you know, what is my goal for the next year? Where am I going to be at or the next 5 years? And how would that version of me make decisions, show up in her business, show up in her life, etc. Our last point here is to reframe negative thoughts into positive affirmations. So I really like to practice this myself. As an example, it could be like if you want to start your business and get out of a really crappy job that you don't love, but you doubt your worthiness of that dream. I think that a lot of people do tend to like kind of struggle with just not feeling worthy of whatever their big dream and desire is, you could practice like writing down some affirmations like, I deserve a job that I love and that I'm excited to wake up to every day. Or, I deserve to be able to use my creative talents to serve people and make money from it, something like that. And then you could just like write them on sticky notes and put them on your bathroom mirrors for little daily reminders. I did this when I was doing some money mindset work with my business coach. I like wrote down my little money affirmations and was just like pasting them all around my desk and my computer so that I like could look at them and see them and just repeat them to myself every day. And that helps too, right? It's kind of like the idea of speaking your desires, your dreams into existence, and goes back to, what we were just saying with like writing your own story or showing up as the person that you want to become.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So those are our 4 tips for beating imposter syndrome. 2 were tactical. The last 2 were a little more mindset, but we hope that you feel armed and ready to go to battle with imposter syndrome next time it peeks its ugly head up in your life. And then we just want to remind you that it is really easy to compare yourself to others. We both are guilty of doing that as well. And it's especially hard when you are inundated with social media. So whenever imposter syndrome does strike, just remember that everybody is starting from the beginning. Not a single person on the face of this earth is born knowing everything. So instead of letting imposter syndrome take over, use, whoever it is that you're looking at or aspiring to be like, use their journey as your inspiration rather than as something negative. I also just want to remind you that there is room for everyone at the table. You do have a unique gift to share with the world. You have a unique perspective and skill to offer. And the world does want and need to hear from you.
Yeah, I know for me that imposter syndrome will always be around. And I also know that that's because I believe in having many chapters in my life and reinventing myself. And I think we all do. We all have many chapters in our lives that are going to stretch us and challenge us. And so that imposter syndrome is going to ebb and flow. I'll kind of climb to a peak where I feel really confident about what I'm doing and I'm going to try something new, and that imposter syndrome is going to creep back up. And so it's really more about knowing how to manage those ebbs and flows when they come along. But truly, if you think about if we did the same thing forever or the same job forever, how boring would that be, right? Like,
Our lives would be so boring.
I think part of what makes life worth living is just having all these like new experiences. So just a reminder to keep leaning into that discomfort, because that means you're positioned for your biggest potential. And with that, we're going to talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to our show. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us wherever you're listening and leave us a quick rating.
And don't forget, you can find us on Instagram at Calligraphy Biz Corner and send us a DM to let us know how you're liking the show. Until next time, keep the ink flowing and the dreams growing.